Sorry, I'm late. I'm late for an important date. Um, yeah, so I've got to talk about a few things this morning, and all of them have to do with Duggars versus Turpins and Amy Duggar King, of all things. Um, if you don't know who I am, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I wrote for Pathos for nearly 10 years, and a column called No Longer Quivering. I was involved with it for a couple of years before that, including writing for that. So I have a lot of experience with these quiverful families. Both the Duggars and the Turpins were definitely quiverful families, both of them. That's what they have in common. But they don't have much beyond that in common. Somebody said yesterday on their live stream that the Turpins and the Duggars were exactly the same. No, not even close. Not even close. While the Duggars do all that, excuse me, I'm just now getting ready. It's been a hell of a day. Trying to get everything done by 11 so I could lay down because my back's killing me. So I am scrambling today, scrambling and wearing my oldest, most beat up clothing. Um, there's no different. I mean, there's no doubt that there's extreme differences between the two families. I just finished reading a book about the Turpins. I haven't seen the interview with the daughters from ABC yet because, see, that's the thing. Here we don't really have access to ABC. I have to search around for an upload that is not ABC linked because, strangely enough, they block anything from Costa Rica. So that is it. So I'm hoping to find it eventually on YouTube. So the Turpins. I just finished reading a book about them. She loves to make fantastical suggestions to herself. Yes, exactly. The Duggars had a television show, and I will say this from reading the book about the Duggars. That was always the plan of Mrs. Turpin. Louise was always wanting to have a television show like the Duggars, and she did cite the Duggars more than once in what she wanted to do, and said that she wanted to be like the Duggars. She wanted a TV show. That's all well and good. Sorry, I don't know why I'm having such a problem with the hair today. Okay, it's devouring me. I got to cut it off or something. The Turpins used, yeah, why am I so out of control crazy today with everything? I can't even find the remote for the AC and I'm freezing. The Turpins, first of all, they were AOG, Assemblies of God. That was their religious background. You have to look at the Duggar family, and they are, sometimes you see them going to an independent fundamentalist Baptist church, sometimes to a Southern Baptist, and they're heavily involved with Bill Gothard and Bill Gothard's thing, which has not a thing to do with AOG. Gothard, and I've said this before, particularly in answering that particular creator's claims, Gothard and the ATI IBLP are not affiliated with any one religion. They had the starving kids. Yes, Angel, it was a situation. And I remember when the Turpins, when it first happened back in 2018, I think it was, when it all came out, when the Turpin daughter escaped and got out and got help for her family, and the police and CPS showed up, and there were kids chained to their beds. The kids had been ritually starved. They were kept chained to their beds. They were only allowed to bathe once a year. They had to eat standing up and in silence the one meal a day they were allowed, which was usually, I read, peanut butter or I forgot, a bologna jalapeno sandwich. Sometimes burritos. I'm guessing frozen burritos. It wasn't really specified. Okay, Jackie. You finally got alive. Congratulations. So the Turpins, the mother and the father, poor Louise, I hate to say this, as much as she tortured her children, you have to look at her background in West Virginia. Her grandfather molested her for years and years and years. Her mother let him. Every time her mother ran out of money, she would bring all three of the girls. Thank you so much, Jackie. It's my yarn fund, and I'm supposed to be going in January, and I'm going to buy crazy yarn because I won't have anyone stop me. um, so the mother and her sisters were routinely molested by their grandfather, who was a minister, by the way, for a while. The mother would bring them over, the girls would get molested, and the grandfather, who was wealthy, would give the mother money. That is what the sisters allege, and I believe that's what happened. Apparently, no girl was safe in that family. So you look at a Louise, the mother, Louise Turpin, there's some things going on there that Coke tequila. I wish I could drink tequila. So you have to look at the mother. You see the extreme damage there. The extreme damage to her mother was molested by her father. And you look at these things and it's like, why did nobody step in and say this isn't right? Society, CPS, all of that failed Louise. And then Louise took her pain and paid it forward in the most tragic and horrible way. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's been sexually molested goes on to do these things to their kids. No, some people go through this stuff and they don't spread it. They don't spread it at all. Michelle Duggar has her faults, but she's nothing like Louise. Exactly, Christine. She's nothing like Louise. And Louise apparently did not like being a mother, so she didn't mother any of her children. The history of the family is only one of the children actually went to school for a while. I think the oldest daughter, through third grade, went to public school, and everybody was torturing her because she showed up in the same clothing every day that was dirty and filthy and smelled. Her hair was unwashed. And so I'm going to look at that school too and say the mandatory reporters of the school failed those kids because they should have at that time seen, hey, something is not right here. We need to take a look at that home and see what's going on. This little girl's wearing the same dirty, filthy clothing all day long. For whatever you might think about the Duggars, they do take care of their children. Their children are well fed. I've seen the Duggars in person myself. I went to a book signing. That's where the photo I used here was from, because I took a ton of photos and used those on my NLQ site, because Jim Bob Duggar would see that I was struck every time I used a quote copyrighted photo from Instagram or Facebook. If I used anything that came from the show, if I did a screen cap, he'd come after me. So that's where I saw it. I saw the kids, the little girls, and the little boys, the whole 9 yards. Everyone was well groomed and smelled okay, wearing nice clothing. And I actually told Michelle that I thought her children were absolutely beautiful because I was struck by that when I met them all. And I'm not a Duggar fan by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, look at what they did to Josh with the purity culture nonsense, when he was struggling with his sexuality. They screwed up in how they handled him, screwed up big time, and took the purity rape culture and really taught that to him. Now, it was interesting. I read that the medical reports on the Turpin children said that 2 of the girls will never be able to conceive or carry a child. It would just be too much. And that's the awful thing about what Mrs. Turpin did to those kids, what Louise did, is that all of the kids have lifelong medical issues that are going to impact them. We're talking liver damage, heart damage, that sort of thing from being starved. Being starved for years, they were starting to have problems with their own muscles breaking down. One Old Testament quote always annoyed me about God visiting the sins of the father to the children. Now, I think that's just a way of laying out the truth. People pass on what they grew up with. Exactly, Angel. I think so. 19% of the abused end up abusing their children. So it's small. Yeah, it probably is a much smaller number. We used to think it was a lot more than that and preach that, but who knows what the actual figures are. because some of that is self-reporting. And if it's like the Turpins, like Louise Turpin, everybody in the family knew it. Nobody reported it. Nobody said a word. It just kept on going, going, going. And that's the tragedy of this thing. If you see these things going on or you suspect it, reach out to law enforcement, social services, and say, hey, I see this happening. I think it may be a problem. At least send them out to investigate. They may not find anything, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Hey, Bermuda's Triangle. So there it is. Reach out if you see these things. That was one thing I noticed in the book on the Turpins is so many neighbors said, well, I thought it was weird. They had their kids up at 3 a.m. marching upstairs, marching, and singing songs, but I just thought they were weird. That's not safe parenting at all. And I am kind of disgusted that everybody saw these things and nobody came forward. So for all their faults, the Duggars do take care of their children. They do provide them with food, nice clothing, a place to sleep. They're not chaining them to their beds like the Turpins did. And like at one point, they were talking about the last time the sheets on their beds had been changed. And that's kind of ironic because today I had a leak in my waterbed. So everything except the top quilt is in the washer right now. I am so funny in particular about my bed linens, but the Turpins said it had been 2 years since the bed linens had been changed. Some of the kids had nothing more than bare mattresses in the house. And they said that the excrement was piled up so high in places that you were gagging walking in. Excrement. There is a book about the Turpins, Bossy. I wouldn't recommend it. I would not recommend the book because I bought it thinking it was going to be a good book. It's written by somebody that writes a lot of these true crime type books. And there's nothing that he published in it that you can't glean from reports online. And the other thing that disturbed me about it, he named all the kids, including the minors. I don't think he should do that in those situations. He actually really outed them. If he did it online, we'd call that doxing. But what he did was he pulled together everything from news reports and from statements made by other people and just cobbled it all together in a book. And there are a lot of writers out there that do that in the true crime genre that have no direct involvement, but they're going to write about it anyway. So that book it's eye-opening, but I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's a great thing. They had a section in there that when I hit it, I was just like, oh my goodness. Amy Duggar King had rated a couple pages. Okay. She absolutely did because apparently she talked to People magazine when this all came out. And People magazine did an article on her talking about the Turpins. And what she said was that she wished she could adopt all of the children. She wanted to adopt all the children. That was her first reaction. Well, I can understand that to an extent, but why she felt like she had to rush and tell People magazine this and talk about it and say, I understand the unique challenges of raising children in a quiverful CULT, except she didn't say quiverful. The Duggars deny they're quiverful. They don't use that word, but they absolutely are quiverful. Just like the Turpins are quiverful. I remember the first news report I saw on the Turpins on the television, and I was talking to my friend Cindy Kunzman. I was just talking to her a little while ago too about things. And I said to Cindy, I said, there's a 15-passenger van in the driveway. I wonder if they're quiverful. The Turpins, if nothing else, are a good example of what happens when you get people that homeschool specifically to hide abuse. There are children in their 20s that did not know their alphabet. They had gone as far as L. They didn't know their alphabet. They couldn't read. There's huge educational gaps in those poor kids. And from everything I'm reading, they are working with different types of therapists trying to bring them back up to speed, which is a good thing, but those kids are going to have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wounds for many years. It's going to take to recover, which I'm really surprised that someone isn't making more of a big deal about them right now because, like I said, they are talking to 2020, I think it is on ABC. Thanks, I can start writing books apparently and can pay for my ketamine infusions. Bossy, it's a plan. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Um, the problem with writing books, and I have to just interject this, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the either family, is this awful thing called block, writer's block. I get it sometimes. And when you're writing about traumatic things, you can really get hung up and think, oh my gosh. And it could take you a while because it's triggering your PTSD. I've redone the book that I was writing about my quiverful experience like 10 times now. And I finally had to say, well, I'm going to have to treat it as a comedy. I'm going to have to write about the very comic things and then slide in the bad stuff because the bad stuff is so triggering to talk about and think about and write about. I have to be able to do it that way. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the Duggars in the future because, the show is over, so the big bucks are no longer rolling in for them. Jim Bob, I hope you invested well on property and things, financial instruments that will give you an income. Because it is possible to live off the interest of your incomes if you're smart, if you do it smartly. And I don't know how sophisticated Jim Bob Duggar is. He has shown that he's not really what I would call that way. And the Turpins are in jail. I think they're in for a long, long time. It may even be life. In the end, they spared their children the ordeal of having to testify, and they both pled guilty, which I am glad of. And I'm glad they did. Now, I did read another book on the Turpins that was beyond awful. It was much worse than this one. It was a supposed prayer book that would teach, that was a Bible study prayer thing, written by Louise's sister, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Vargas, I think is the name. I don't think Jim Bob is really that smart. I don't think he is either. I don't think he is. There's so many things about him. I don't think he's smart. And I don't think that he probably would use an investment counselor that would tell him the right things to do anyway. So there's that. I don't think he's very smart. Man, I have got paint all in my hair from yesterday. Hey, Melly. So the sister wrote this book. I read it. It's pretty awful. It reads like kind of a gossip-a-thon about everything that happened. And the end of each chapter, she throws some kind of, think about this in light of the light of Jesus and pray for this. And I'm just like, I was not amused. I was like, nope, 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 nope. If you're going to write a manual about your own life and how you came out of it and prayer, it's not a good idea to wrap your sister's scandal in there too. She reads these books so we don't have to. Oh yeah. Well, when I get writer's block, I always remember that even Hemingway got it, and he once had it for years. That it's not so bad if I get it. Not only that, I have a book of exercises, writing prompts. It actually helps quite a bit. And the other thing is I always have I don't want to call it a romance novel because it's not that. Let's just say I have a fictional book that it's not Mary Sue because I'm nothing like this person that I'm writing about. But I have this dark comedy book I'm writing, and I have this other one about a relationship between a man and a woman that starts weird. So when I can't write that book, I move on to something else. It helps a lot. With the smut. Well, I haven't written the smutty part yet. There will be smutty parts. There will be smutty parts. There will be a whole lot of sexual tension. I like sexual tension in writing and in movies. My husband said, "Why are you watching that Jane Austen movie again?" It's like sexual tension, dude. It's the best. It just does it for me. I don't know why. Jim Bob wouldn't like working with women in DC since he thinks women shouldn't work. Angela, he's actually running for state office and he would still work with women. Have you watched any of the Turpin sisters interviews? I wanted to find out more and watched one. I can see the abuse from just one interview. Melly, I haven't had a chance to watch those yet because those happened on ABC. ABC is not a television station here in Costa Rica. We get NBC, CBS out of Miami, and I'm blocked on YouTube from watching certain things because of my country. So I would have to go through a quite the let's say internet twister to get to them to make them play. And I would have to go in and reset my VPN to totally different things. And I hate to do that because my VPN, the way it's set right now, my automatic payments recognize me. And if I do that, they're not going to. And it's going to be a mess the next time I have to pay my bills. So there's that. But I can tell just from those poor kids, they're going to have trouble forever. And that's really unfortunate. Her family, her sisters wanted custody of the kids. And I don't think they've ended up there. And I'm glad because the sisters were going around with Dr. Oz of all people and visiting in jail and filming and doing this and doing that, going in the courthouse. Her sisters have milked this damn thing for every penny they can get, which I personally find reprehensible. Elizabeth Vargas's book, like I said, all it was milking the situation for dollars to get money. And Elizabeth was pretending to be all holier than thou in her book. The reality is she's lost custody of her children to CPS before and has been involved in some not so nice things before she finally came to Jesus. So I had a hard time reading the book and saying, yeah, about that. You need to maybe back off a bit. Sounds like the sisters would have exploited them. Absolutely, the sisters would have exploited them. And Will, absolutely right. Dr. Oz is pitifully bad. I saw him do a series one time on chronic illnesses, and I was just watching that, shaking my head like, dude, no, don't say that. Don't say that. You're making everything all the worse by how you're behaving. Jim Bob probably saw John Webster's father's beautiful new DC office and was drooling. Bozzy, I think that is his ultimate goal is to run for some type of national office. Jim Bob has been a state representative once, and he's run before and not once. I'm thinking that he's just he lives so far in fantasy land that he attacks anybody that goes against that. He tries to make sure that the world sees his family as perfect, which I don't see how that could work at all now that we have Josh Duggar's trial upcoming. November is going to be wild, you guys. It's already been wild with the Nat's various things she's saying, all kinds of stupid things that have happened. Discovering that people on Parler had a hit list of YouTubers they were going to attempt to take down was kind of crazy too. There's so many crazy things have happened. I doubt he'll get elected considering what's going on with Josh. Christine, you would hope not. But if you go to the Duggars Facebook page and you start reading the comments below his announcement, it's frightening how many people are supporting him still. I'd say the split was about 50-50, 50% supporting, and then 50% of us going, oh, hell no, why would you do that? Their dialect was like that of a 10-year-old with speech impediment. It's sad. You can tell they were deprived of true education. Melanie, it wasn't just education. They were deprived of socialization. Socialization skills are important to learn how to talk, to say things. That's why these girls are talking like 10-year-olds with speech impediments because they never had the opportunity to converse with other people besides their siblings, and it was just this closed loop that was not getting anywhere. I doubt yeah, he's not going to get elected. I just have a feeling about it because 50% of people disliking him on his own Facebook page is pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So I don't know if you're going to see me more or less on here now. Speaking, I got to circle back to Amy first. Amy Duggar King talking about them like that in Facebook was the biggest attention grab I've seen of Amy yet. Amy, people call her Famey because she tries to ride on the coattails of her famous cousins. She tries to get attention, all of that. So this was just another attempt by Amy to try to make herself relevant, to insert herself in the situation. Good going, Amy. And I just wanted to say you may or may not see me more or less now. I was talking about on Twitter, my husband was exposed to COVID. He teaches English at a language school here. And he has one-on-one tutoring he does too. One of his one-on-one tutoring students has come down with COVID. And while we're both vaccinated, that is no guarantee you won't get it. So he has been sitting across the desk from this guy face to face for weeks. So he is quarantined right now. I'm not quarantined, and I'm trying to do everything I can to make sure everything is about as wiped out as possible. So we'll see. We'll see if he gets it. He's really been lucky. He's had direct contact with people with it before and not contracted it. I still, to this day, cannot understand how he can be around people like that and not contract it. I hope he doesn't, because I don't need it. I don't need it at all. So here we are with it. And I'll be around, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here. Yeah. Is he running against anyone in the primary? Well, I'm not sure. I got to do a little research on that. I would hate to say, but there's always got to be a Democrat. So he's running as a Republican, and obviously. So I'm guessing there's going to be Democrats against him. Whether there's another Republican contender, God, I hope so. I hope so. And I hope it's a solid one that's not quite as awful as some of them. That's one thing that is interesting to me about politics. There are people in each party that I like. There are people who ran on the Republican ticket in the past that I would have voted for in the election because I don't think they're that bad. I think they're a pretty decent person. I tell everybody with politics, I ride the fence. There's some things I'm very conservative on. There's some things I'm not. I'm a big believer in feeding people and making sure everybody has health care. Those are two huge, important things for me. So that's where I line up. So I'm hoping that there is at least one more Republican running against him in the primary, and that it's a reasonable Republican. I don't follow Duggars. How does Jim Bob State take to him? Melly, it's kind of unusual. And I know this because I've talked to people in that area. I've been doing that for years. For a while after I lost my job at the clinic I was working at, because I dared have bad asthma, and ended up riding the ambulance to the hospital a number of times. They fired me. So because I had no recent work experience where I could get a good review, I had a hard time finding a job afterwards. And I actually took a job that I worked for almost 4 years at a international florist helpline. If you can avoid working at a call center, it's probably a good idea. I worked at the call center all the time, and I would talk to people all over the country, all over the world, and every now and then I would get somebody either in Springdale or in Tontitown, and they would talk about the Duggars, say, "Hey, I see you're from Tontitown. Do you know the Duggars?" Would just come right out with it. And to a man, I never heard one person say, "Yes, I know them. They're wonderful people." What I heard was, "I can't stand those jackasses." I can't stand them. They'd start ranting and saying all the crazy things that the Duggars had pulled through the years that Jim Bob Duggar expected. He would find some place that said kids eat free and bring in his dozens of kids. They expected to get freebies just about everywhere they went. They didn't like paying for a damn thing. They disrupted so many things. I'm trying to remember. There was one thing that I was told that was pretty crazy. But it's basically the thing was Jim Bob asked for freebies. Oh, I know what it was. They had a lot of problems at the landfill across the road from the Duggar spread is this large landfill. And the Duggars weren't bringing household trash. They were bringing construction trash. Every time Jim Bob would flip a house, they would bring all their construction trash over. He is a real grifter, Christine. He is a real grifter. He's got grifting down to an art form and a science now. So they pulled so many sleazy, stupid things like that they aren't well loved in their own hometown as a result, except by the people in their own little Baptist group. There's that. So I'm not sure he's going to get elected. I mean, look recently, one of his sons ran and was soundly defeated. I remember on their show, Jim Bob was taking his sons about to do teaching them about haggling. Okay, you could see the owner of the establishment was standing her ground and getting irritated. Yes, Angela. How would you like it if you had a business and this guy with all these kids walked in and immediately started haggling and wanted his crap for free? I would be offended. You haggle sometimes. Hope his kids didn't inherit his grifting gene. I hope they didn't either, but they were raised that way. They think that's normal. What has Jim Bob accomplished besides capitalizing off getting his wife pregnant? Stephanie, I think that you could say his accomplishments are stuff like starting his own towing business, doing real estate. All I can say is Arkansas must have some very, very overtly generous licensure laws on real estate. They just must, because it seems like it's as easy to get a real estate license there as it is here. Here, you don't even have to have a license. You don't have to have any training, nothing. Just hang your shingle out and call yourself a real estate agent and take people around. Does he have anything more than a high school diploma? No. That is the most he has. Hey, Sonny D. So he's rich, but he's spreading himself thin, paying for Josh's lawyers and running for office. Republican states are notorious for being loosely regulated. Yes, Clem, I know that. And that's something that bothers me about homeschooling. I am not against homeschooling. Like I said, I have had friends that have managed to get their kids full rides at UVA at 16 because they've done such an outstanding job with homeschooling and the child learns so much. It works for some people. But there are a lot of situations like the Turpins where they're doing it to hide abuse. There's situations like the Duggars where they're using the ATI wisdom booklets, which have no scientific data in them whatsoever. Everything is just screwed up. I mean, you could look at how they teach about eyeballs and just all the science stuff is just all kinds of wrong. There's a science teacher that actually downloaded all the ATI booklets and broke them down. And that was something to see. So here's the thing about homeschooling. If you want to homeschool, fine, but you should prove that you could at least do it. The kids should be doing standardized testing once or twice a school year, just like they do in the private schools and the public schools. Even though some private schools are exempt from that. I found out California has really loose, really loose regulations, and they do not require any private school to do any kind of testing to see if the kids are on grade. So it's not just homeschools that are using these loopholes. It's private schools too sometimes use them. So there is that. Yeah. And I think that California's is just take attendance for homeschooling, and for private schooling, it's take attendance and allow the fire marshal to inspect the building you're using once a year. That was a weird job that a friend of mine who ran a employment agency once sent me out on. It was a job to work at a religious school because they were insisting on having someone that was a good churchgoer. So at the time, I was still drinking the Kool-Aid, even though I was judging the hell out of the Lutherans there for not being strict enough. I took a job there. I left after 2 months. Why? Because number one, I was hired for a different position and I was not allowed to do my actual job, the thing I was hired for. Number two, I got tasked to do a lot of things that did not fall under my job description. Stupid stuff like, well, I shouldn't say stupid stuff. Let me rephrase this. Important stuff that needs to go through committee, and it's stuff that you would think the headmaster or the headmaster's staff would handle. I had to draw out fire escape plans. I had to come up with fire escape plans. And because the fire department showed up, the state inspector, and they had no fire department plans. They had no policy about that. They had no tornado policy or earthquake policy or anything remotely like that at all. No bad weather policy. They didn't even have a handbook. So I was handed the handbook for St. Anne's Belfield in Charlottesville, I think it was, and told, write a handbook for us based upon St. Anne's, write a evacuation plan, write a earthquake and a tornado policy, write a bad weather policy, write out what we need to do for fire, and do the drawings. That was not part of my job description at all, but I got saddled with it. I also got saddled with going out and getting a weather radio for each building that in the office, so they would hear the alerts and they would call and do a lockdown. It was just crazy. It was just crazy. So when they tried to make me teach a trigonometry class, and I didn't even take that in school. I took minimal math because I'm not good at math. And they said, oh, go in there and teach that class of the day. The teacher is absent. I'm like, no. The best I could do would be say, everybody do a worksheet. But as far as teaching actual math, no. So I left. I left a good paying job because it was ridiculous. And egregious as the Turpin situation is, I tend to err on the side of looser regulations. I fear Big Brother too much. Angela, I understand that. Just that my thing is with that is I'm looking at this and I'm seeing people like the Turpins using it to hide abuse. And there's got to be some kind of happy middle ground between what everybody fears and what it is now. I would really like to see them implement something like this. Yeah, I really want to see something like this happen. And here's the thing, this private school I worked at for just 2 months before I quit, not only were they skirting all those regulations, so I can't do trig. They were skirting the regulations. They had nothing, and they'd been in business a long, long time, and they got caught having none of that and telling me I had to put it in place. So the thing is, they were breaking a lot of rules, a lot of laws. One of the things that they did was they brought in a parent to do the lunches, and the lunches were not even remotely, even slightly nutritious. It was just the most crazy prepackaged foods and things. And I tried to explain to them, I said, hey, why don't you sign up for the FDA food program? A lot of schools participate in that. They give you menus of what you want to, what they want you to serve. You serve it. You sent in your voucher to the USDA for their food program, and they pay you like, I think at the time, I want to say it was like $1.35 for breakfast and $1.50 for lunch for each meal that you provided for each child. They gave you a subsidy just to ensure that the kids were getting nutritious food because you had to serve the menu. And I was shot down and said, no, that costs too much. It costs too much to feed the kids, that kind of thing. And I was just kind of like flabbergasted because that is just a basic in a lot of private and public schools. It was a basic at the residential treatment center I worked at, and they had their menus down to a science, and it was good food the way they were serving it. But when you have profit in there, and these people were paying big bucks to send their kids to this Lutheran school, it was one of the best private schools in our area. So I was pretty horrified that all this was going down and they weren't addressing anything. So, and I don't know if the Turpins couldn't have afforded to go there, but back to homeschooling, I just think it depends upon how you do your homeschooling and what curriculum you're teaching. My kids asked me recently, said, what would you have done, Mom, if COVID had happened when we were in school, knowing that I'm not good at some things. My husband, he's an excellent teacher. I'm all over the place. It's just not one of my strengths. I just turned to my daughter and I said, well, as much of a drag as it would have been for you and for me, I would have done it. I would have sat down and written a curriculum for you based on your age, and we would have stuck with it, and I would have made you study. I'd have been standing over you, making sure it happened. Even though in our family, my husband was the one that stood over everybody and made them do their homework. I'd done that with my first daughter, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. You can do it. You can. This is one of your participation things that you get a participation trophy for, is being the homework dad. So when they are doing these homeschooling things and not using curriculums, it's harder, obviously, if you're not going to use a curriculum, but is it really if you're using a flawed curriculum like ATI? I don't know. It's just a hard situation to know which way to go if you're homeschooling. It really is. And that's why I would really like to see testing going on. Some people do it well, some people do it horribly. And then there are some people that use it to hide the abuse factor. And like I said, that was one of the things that West Virginia was trying to pass. I don't know if they actually did pass it, was saying that if you got CPS complaints in your homeschooling, you're required to put your child in public school. My understanding is that is why the Rodriguezes pulled up stakes and moved from Ohio from West Virginia. And they had already moved from New York to West Virginia because they were getting CPS complaints. They were getting CPS complaints in West Virginia. Jill says she feeds her kids. Speaking of a non-feeding family, I see the food she's cooked for holidays. And it's just like, this woman doesn't have a clue how to cook or how to cook for that many people. I think that's a large part of the problem. So her kids are not quite as emaciated as the Turpins, but clearly something is going on in that household too, no matter how much Jill screams that she feeds her kids. I just don't see it. And here's the thing that scares me. You look at the Turpin children, they have long-lasting physical effects from having been starved. They have liver damage. They have damage to most of the muscles in their body. They have heart damage, some of them, because they weren't being fed. They're being fed once a day, one scanty meal. Lifelong side effects. So, you guys, that's it. So now you know the Turpins were a hot mess of just the worst things you could think of. They were AOG. The Duggars are Baptist related. And while they have their own different hot mess, it doesn't have anything to do with being actually abusive to the children in that manner. Now, I know that certain internet commentator likes to claim that they beat their kids, and they may because they do follow the Pearls method. They've talked about it, but it's not to a level that would rise to the idea of child abuse, probably. There's a big, because there's a sliding law on that. They're in a Republican state with very lax laws on things like child abuse. I would like to see the Duggars get investigated for one thing. The Jackie Coogan law holds that you're supposed to put a certain percentage of your child's income aside for them when they're grown if you're involved in entertainment. Jim Bob skirted around that and had the children listed as volunteers so he didn't have to put any money aside for them. He could work them longer hours than you could normally work a kid involved in entertainment. He just went all the way around the regs. I'd like to see him get in trouble for that. I think that that is awful. If you didn't know it, the Jackie Coogan law was put in place because of a child performer named Jackie Coogan, who, when he turned 18, tried to access all the money he made, and his parents had spent it. They'd spent every damn dime. He has exploited those kids. And like the Turpins, I expect there to be fallout in those children, emotional, spiritual fallout for what he's done. There's always fallout when you exploit your children. There just is. Okay, you guys, I'm going to go. I hear my husband's trying to come in. I'll talk to you later.